Welcome everybody to Study Club for Splunk at B-Sides 22. First up, big shout out to Clara, Rich and Ryan for putting on an amazing community event yet again. Absolutely fantastic. So today we're going to be looking at Microsoft Active Directory and LDAP. Now this is going to be a rather unique hands-on session. And when I say hands-on, I absolutely mean it. So just like an Oprah Winfrey show, everyone attending will be able to request to have a lab orchestrated while you watch with the scenario of the session overlaid. You'll have access to the front end and the back end. Everyone gets one. Now, there's no need to worry about keeping up, as you can replay the recording of this session throughout the day and longer, and you can pause and play as necessary. So we're also going to have a Slack channel as well. QR code on screen now, Study Club for Splunk. And now that's in the Splunk user group Slack. We're going to be keeping a close eye on this to support everybody. And we're going to be looking to keep this orchestration going as long as we can. So maybe a couple of weeks, maybe longer. We'll see how it goes. And we're going to close out the session today with a really nice fireside chat with myself and Greg, sharing some observations, insights, gotchas, best practices, and next steps. So on with the show. So let me introduce myself. So my name is Aleem Cummins, a member of Splunk Trust, been doing community forever, I think about 10 years. But the key thing here for this session to figure out is I'm a community servant, always have been, always will be. And I'm really pleased and honored to have my very close friend, Greg Sullivan, on the call today.
Hi, Aleem. Thank you for the great introduction. I've been part of the Splunk community since 2015. Been a consultant since 2015. Really care about the Splunk community and the greater community as a whole. I too am a community servant, and I'm really excited for this hands-on demo that we're going to be doing today.
Oh, fantastic.
So, Aleem, tell me, what is Study Club for Splunk?
So Study Club for Splunk is a community initiative. Now, it was founded last year by myself, Tony Renke, absolute legend in the Splunk community, and Suman Kajavelli. Now, look, us three, right, we've been involved in multiple user groups around the world for, I guess, a decade. We've run hundreds of sessions. We do community coaching and mentoring. We've spoken at .conf together probably over a dozen times, and we're very heavily involved in good causes. So Tony, to his absolute credit, he founded B-Sides with Clara and Rich a number of years ago. And Suman does a lot of work for good causes with Splunk Global Impact, does tremendous work there. And we're all also members of Splunk Trust as well.
That's great. So what is Splunk Trust? And is that something that's open to the community? Can I join Splunk Trust?
You absolutely can. I mean, as a community servant, you don't need to be in Splunk Trust to be that. But if you're in Splunk Trust, you do need to be a community servant. So you have to give, I guess, your life and your soul to the Splunk community. You've got to be there in actions as well as words, be really, really helpful. Now, you can nominate yourself, Greg, or other people can nominate you. There's a very well-established selection process that kicks in usually just before the .conf each year, and then the members are confirmed. And Splunk Trust is also very much supported by, Splunk themselves.
That's great. So I do notice that the three founding members of Study Club for Splunk are Trust members. What's the correlation between the two?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, what Splunk Trust has done, it's established a very special collaborative community with a common focus. And that's kind of fostered the scenario where we work closely together, and we could see that maybe there was a gap that we could address in the wider community, and then we give attention to that. So what, like Study Club for Splunk, was essentially born from the core values of Splunk Trust.
That's great. So who can actually get involved with Study Club for Splunk?
The good news is everybody can get involved. You either can get involved maybe as a contributor like your good self, or as somebody who just wants to learn. If you want to tag along, absolutely fantastic.
So then tell me, why is it that it was founded?
So we founded it really to sort of turbo boost the journeys of our Splunk community. And, this is especially true, let's say, for, those learning maybe in colleges and communities who were at the early stages, those who might have limited resources, or those who might be coming back to work after an extended period. Perhaps they've had children.
I think it would be great for our brave men and women that were part of the military service that are looking to transition afterwards.
I think that's 100% true. And I'm so happy to actually that we can actually do something to give back to our brave men and women.
So tell me, what will people benefit from being involved with Study Club for Splunk, Aleem?
Key benefit, I suppose, Greg, is like it's totally free. Don't need to worry about it. It's validated by trusted community members based on their experience. And we've taken care to actually demystify some of the learning blocks you have to go through to start learning Splunk in itself. Example might be AWS, something like that. And we have our Slack support channel as well. And we also have a really good GitHub repository. So all the things we've done in the past, we've actually documented them, we've put them in GitHub, and we've shot videos. So it's a really good resource that can also be used by user groups and repurposed for their events as well.
So Aleem, where have you done talks already?
That's a good question, actually, Greg. So we've already done a number of talks, and a really good one we did last year was on AWS and sort of demystifying it. Because for people to maybe get on with Splunk, there's a good chance you've got to learn AWS. And there's a lot of things in there, Lambda functions, security groups, how to get the right permissions on these PEM files, things like that. So we did a 1-hour session at B-Sides last year. And you know what? That 1-hour session took 100 hours to actually put together. 100
That's
hours.
a lot. That's a lot of research and development that you had to do for it.
It is, Greg. I mean, it might be because maybe I didn't have the full knowledge of AWS and I was learning myself. I guess if I had you do it, it might have been done faster.
Well, I'm just glad that you're able to do that work instead of putting it on the actual users of Study Club for Splunk.
Yeah, very, very much so. Very much so.
So tell me, I see that you've done quite a few talks at .com.
Yeah, in fact, all of these talks were done with Tony and Suman. So 2022 probably stands out a little bit, Greg. We did 3 talks on the Thursday of .conf in Las Vegas. So that was actually all hands on. So we're on the stage, going through scenarios. We had, let's say, up to 40 people in each of the 1-hour sessions spinning up an environment that then they could follow along with us. And that was like a really, really good way to learn because we were all doing it together as a group. And we had an interesting scenario, actually. I was like talking and typing on the screen, and I made a couple of mistakes in my sequence. And all of a sudden I'd broken the demo. And you came up actually like Captain America, straight away, fixed it, said what you had done. Then we built that into the talk. So it was very authentic and people could say, yeah, this is what happens in the real world. We actually made a mistake. We fixed it together and we've learned from it. And that was quite inspiring for me, Greg. And that's one of the reasons I think that I want to do more and more of these type of sessions, hands-on with people.
Yeah, I think it was great, Aleem. The authenticity, the feedback that I had gotten from it, it was truly amazing. And as we all know, even the best professionals make mistakes. We're constantly learning on the job and what we need to do. So I thought it was a true sight of real life. So, Aleem, tell me, how is it that you put this all together?
Well, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a bit of a 4-step process, Greg. And what we really need to do in step 1 is we need to identify, what are the hot topics? Now, to do that, we can poll the community, we can poll user group leaders, or we can poll people who are really involved in doing the doing. And that's a great example of yourself. So we identified last year AWS. That seemed to be a blocker for people wanting to go learn Splunk. You had to sort of get that out of the way first. And I'm sure, Greg, you can probably think of other ones that we could maybe attack as well.
Absolutely. Something such as Splunk Connect for syslog.
Yeah. And we did actually some really good work with Madimo last year, I think, on the Kubernetes as well, the connector for that one. That was pretty strong. But the thing is, once we kind of identify what these hot topics are, what we then need to do is kind of assemble the heroes, the people who are in the know. And then we got to work like crazy. We got to check it all against the Splunk documentation because we want to ensure that what we're saying is enshrined in best practice. And we also want to validate that what we say is true because it may be the case that, nobody's fallible. We might say things that aren't quite what we'd like to say, so please always validate. It's very, very keen. Great.
So that really speaks to the 100 hours that you and Suman put in for that AWS talk about how you worked like crazy. You were putting those documents together and then you were validating all your work.
You had to, and I think it was a lot of sleepless nights and weekends, but The thing, Greg, in the last year, I think there's been almost 1,300 hits on YouTube for that video clip. And that's like really good, because does that then suggest that all those people don't have to do that heavy lifting because Study Club already did it for you? So that makes it very much worthwhile.
So once all that work's done, we got to get this out to the people. So tell us, how do we do that?
So what we need to do is give it to in a form that works for everybody. So what we might have to do is write some code. We might have to make some videos. What's the key thing professionals have to do, Greg?
We have to document everything that we do. And we have to make sure that we're documenting the steps and that it's very easy to understand the documentation. So the next person coming through can pick up exactly what was done.
Plus, we're going to ensure customer success. It's very good for continual improvement, because you know what? Even documentation can change as well. So we have to be super strong with that, Greg.
Absolutely. Now, tell me, once we actually package it all together, how are you sharing it out?
So, I mean, right now, as an example, we're sharing it out to B-Sides 22. We did it for B-Sides 21 and other conferences as well. But we also want to share this out to user groups. So if any user groups think that's an interesting demo, can I incorporate that into my talk? Absolutely, yes. Spin up the environments, incorporate that into your talk. So we're trying to enable user groups maybe to make it a little bit easier to pull in some hot topics, because we've already done the work on that one. Now, this is also very good for, let's say, students, colleges, individual study clubs, individuals even. And it's really good then, because what we have to do is deliver this out in talks and demos. Very, very important.
Well, since you bring up demos, I know we're doing one today, so let's get to it.
Right then. AD and LDAP. What's it all about, Greg? Why would we even use that in Splunk?
I'm glad you asked, Aleem. So Active Directory is a Microsoft Windows Server database and set of services that allows users to connect to networked resources that they need to be able to get their work done. LDAP, on the other hand, is an open source cross-platform protocol that is used for a directory service authentication. So they work hand in hand, being able to use your user account in Windows to authenticate across multiple different services within your organization to get work done. One of those services being such as Splunk. So you would be able to use AD and LDAP, really the LDAP protocol, to be able to authenticate users to be able to log in and use Splunk, which is a great benefit, because then it's used really well with security control. So say Joe Smith works with the company, needs access to all of these services. We're able to grant him that access through the LDAP protocol and Active Directory to those services. And the day that he leaves, instead of having to go out and remove all the local accounts for everything that Joe Smith was working on, we're able to then remove all of that access through one central location in Active Directory.
Oh, fantastic. So is that a bit like single sign-on then, Greg?
It's similar, but it's a different protocol. So
Gotcha.
Single sign-on is a lot of times using an LDAP protocol to connect with the network backend, but it's just a different protocol on how you actually do that connection.
So let me ask you this, Greg. With all the implementations you've done in Splunk, do most enterprise customers tend to be using LDAP?
I would say a vast majority of them are using LDAP or another SAML provider such as Okta or Ping Identity.
Well, fantastic. Excellent. On with the demo.
Absolutely. Let's get to it. Let's show the people how this is done.
Excellent.
So, Liam, now that everyone's on the form to fill out to actually build the environment, why don't you take us through what you need to do?
Yeah, sure thing, Greg. So what we need to do here is just put in a nickname and your email address. We don't need anything else in terms, like we got data protection, data governance, don't need any of that stuff whatsoever. Quick email and we're good to go. So for me, for example, let me type in study club, then just pop in my email address. just click on then request lab now. And as soon as I do that, it's going to give you a confirmation. There you go. So now we've started the process of orchestrating your environment. And what I'd say there is, what do you mean orchestrate the environment? So we're actually using here the Global Academy for Splunk. And that's something that's been put together by our friends at Bits.io. What that is, it allows us to orchestrate environments automatically and lay down scenarios that we can then take people through. So the scenario today is implementing the connector for Active Directory and LDAP. So what'll happen then, Greg, after, let's say, a minute or so, you'll get a confirmation email. It might look a little bit different when you get your email, and that will just say, yeah, thanks very much, got your request. By the way, there's the PDF guidance that goes along with the talk. You can go and read that. And then what'll happen, I'd say, Greg, 7-8 minutes later, probably, you'll get another email. And what that will do, that will give you the technical details of where you need to go, what you need to do. But just watch out, by the way, just in case it ends up in your spam, okay? So gas_admin@bits.ioinc.com, just make sure that's clear. So that's kind of the technical instructions. But Greg, it might be better if we kind of talk about what does the environment look like as well.
Absolutely. Do we have a diagram of that by chance?
Yeah, let me bring up a diagram. Let me just, yeah.
That's awesome. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at what you just did, right? You're the web browser user. You created the form. It's now creating this environment in the background, which is a Jumpbox. Aleem, what is a Jumpbox?
That's interesting, Greg, because Jumpbox is what we're calling it. In other organizations, they might call it something else. Essentially, rather than expose your Splunk server to the outside world, we have it in a demilitarized zone known as a DMZ. So what we do is we have one box we expose to the outside world. People can log into that one using SSH, and then they jump on to the Splunk server. So it's an internal connection. So it's more secure.
Gotcha. So in reality, the Jumpbox is sitting in both zones, both the private and the public zone. And it only has a very locked down connection into the private network. Is that correct?
Absolutely, because what we're trying to do here at Greg is kind of instill that sense of best practice. So that's why we're doing it this way. We didn't have to, but let's try to do it from a best practice perspective.
Great. So then we also have our Splunk all-in-one. What do you mean by all-in-one?
So by default, if you just download Splunk from splunk.com and you install it, it has everything already working. The indexes, the search head, it's all in one. So it's literally, you don't need multiple instances of Splunk. It's all in one.
So it's all the features on one server.
All the features. Exactly.
Gotcha.
Right. Exactly right.
And then I see we also have the Microsoft Active Directory. And that shows that it is only connected through LDAP. So we're not able to connect to that one. Is that correct?
We've locked that down. Absolutely. I think in Appendix B, we show you some screenshots of what it looks like on the inside, but that is a Microsoft instance.
And I do believe that we will be offering an Amazon machine image, also known as an AMI, at the end of this, that LDAP server, the AD server, correct?
I think the thing, Greg, is this, right? The problem we might face is that we can all in theory learn about LDAP, but can we actually find an Active Directory to play with and work against? That's what the team here we've created. So we could make that available as an AMI for other people to use that in what they wanted to do. So we're going to look to see how we can do that for sure. So watch this space.
That's great. Well, I think that second email should have come through by now. Do you want to, should we actually get going?
Absolutely. So once that's in play, what we'll be able to do is then log on to our Splunk instance. So this is the first time we would have logged in. So I would have got a username of admin. Password would have been randomly generated. So let's log in. And look down here on the left-hand side, Greg. So what we can see straight away is that we have 5 apps. Now, I'm the admin, and by default, if you make an app, the admin can read it, okay? So what we have, I'm logged in as admin, I can see those 5 apps. But what we'd now like to do is start to lock this down based on Active Directory. Now, to do that, here in authentication methods, we have a few options. We can do none, which is the default. We can also use SAML. And a quick plug here is that we did a really, really strong talk on SAML using Okta a few months ago this year. It's well worth a listen. There's been quite a lot of views on that one. So everybody go watch that one for sure. So that's SAML. So today, of course, we're talking about Active Directory. And another plug as well from our good friend Tom Kopchak from Splunk Trust with Hurricane Labs. Tom puts out the most amazing articles you've ever seen. So if you want to really learn about Active Directory, read that article, then have it in terms of looking at the demo we're doing, and it kind of puts it all together. So what we need to do here is we need to connect now to the LDAP server. Now, what we need to do straight away is we need to make a new connection by hitting that green button, but then we now need to fill in some of these settings. So what's this strategy name about, Greg?
It's just a unique identifier for the connection that we're going to be making. So it's a stanza that's going to be created in configuration files in Splunk for us to be able to identify this specific set of settings that we're creating.
Gotcha. And what's the order of preference then with these precedents, with these strategy names, Greg? How does that work?
That is a very good question. And the answer to that is it's going to read the file from top to bottom. So
yeah.
It depends where the file is located. If it's located in system local, which we'll get into later when we're showing the backend configurations, but it's reading the file top to bottom. So if there's a stanza that's already filled at the top, it's going to read that one first.
Gosh, is that like alphabetical then, in terms of these names?
No.
I'll cut that bit out then.
I thought it was initially, but that's application name, right? So
right,
that's when it's doing it from individual applications.
Gotcha. And just to point out as well, in this example, we're actually using port 389. So best practice, Greg, would you typically do SSL?
I'd be using 636.
Gotcha. But for this, lab, it's absolutely fine. It's just for testing. So 389, absolutely fine. So these settings here you see on the screen, these settings you will get from your Active Directory admin. But at least you now know what you need to ask for.
Absolutely.
Put in your password.
And where are we seeing all these settings in the documentation that for this lab?
Yeah, so we have the guidance document as well, and they're all spelled out in the guidance document. But just bear in mind, for the individual emails people are going to get back, the password might be different, and the IP address might be different. So it's in GitHub as well, but just watch out for that. It's a gotcha. Yeah.
And what's this group setting we're doing here?
So on Active Directory, we have these sort of group subtrees. So we're just making sure that we map to the right one.
Perfect. And looks like it was as simple as that.
It was, oddly enough. I mean, there's not much more to it. I mean, the key for this talk is actually hands-on doing it. So, Greg, once we've actually created that LDAP strategy, the next task we need to do?
We have to map the groups.
We need to map the groups.
And so what are we mapping them to?
We're mapping them to Splunk roles.
That's right.
So if, for example, we look at the finance one, and in there you can see, Greg, that we have a number of users that have been pulled down from Active Directory. So we want to map the Active Directory group finance to our role named finance. Relatively straightforward to do, of course. And let's go through a couple of these. What we do next? What, security?
Human resources.
Human resources. Yeah. And again, we already have a role, easy mapping. And then let's do security next then. We have a security group.
Well, it looks like we're missing a couple roles here too, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at IT Ops, for example, everything's looking good. We have an Active Directory group, but we haven't got a role. Yeah, so what we're going to need to do, and let's just check, is it the same for sales? Yeah, we haven't got
It
a
is.
local role for sales. So we need to go and actually create one. Now, to do that, what you need to do, just click on settings. Yeah. And then go down to roles.
What are you doing here? It looks like you're cloning a role of power.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, this talk isn't about the sophistication of roles and the art of the possible. So what we're really trying to do here is just quickly create a role. To do that, easiest way is to clone an existing role. And the one we want to clone here is the power role.
And just for general knowledge, what's the difference between the power role, user role, and admin role?
It just is really about the capabilities that are a part of the role. So the admin role can have a lot more capabilities. Then we narrow it down to power, and then we narrow it down to user. So it all really depends on the people who log into Splunk, what access they really need.
So it's really based off of least privilege then, yeah? So
Yes, it is.
User role, you want to have the least amount of privilege. Power role, you're still limiting some of that.
Yeah.
And then admin is full access.
Gotcha. So now we go back into mapping groups again. And this time around, we can now see, great, we have an IT ops group and a role. There's the users that have been pulled through.
Great.
And then let's do the same for sales. And we find sales, create that. There's the users, save, and job done. Now,
great. So Aleem, now that we have all the groups and the users within the groups assigned to a role, how do we limit their access and visibilities to only what they need to see?
Gotcha. So let's decide what is it that we want to reduce access to. So in this instance, it's going to be the 5 apps that we saw. So if we're going to manage apps, Greg, and let's say we take the finance app, by default, that's what you get. So I think what we should now do is let's narrow it down to the finance role, but then let's also give the security role access as well in our scenario.
Sounds good. Let's do it. See how it's done.
Yeah.
So you're telling me it's as easy as clicking just a couple boxes?
The clicking's easy. Understanding what you're doing and how to do it, I guess, is the bit that takes time to figure that out in your head and experience. But it's nice to lay it down in a video and a demo just to make it easier for people on their journeys. Yeah.
It's also nice to see that it's not a lot of coding or manual typing you need to do. It's literally all GUI based, and you're able to just select some boxes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could do this using the command line. But in this instance, we're just going to use the GUI.
Great.
Okay. That's good. And I think
so now that we're doing this, Aleem, what are we going to do next to be able to prove out the value or prove out the concept of limiting the access? What's the best way to test this?
It's really easy, Greg. Log off, log on as the user in question. That's all you have to do for the test. So we've kind of connected into LDAP. We've now applied permissions against the apps. Now let's test that it all worked. Let's validate.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and do that. Show us what we got to do.
Yeah. So let's just go here.
So we're going home. We're just wanting to show that we have access to all 5 still, right?
Yeah, we do. That's a good point, actually. So there you go. Now let's log in. So here's a list that we have created on Active Directory. So anybody watching this, if you want to change up the scenario, there's the list of groups and the list of users and the passwords. You feel free to play with those. So let's pick from IT Ops, let's say John Kumar. Okay. And let's just put in the password for John Kumar and sign in. Bingo. So now you can see that.
Because he was part of the IT Ops group.
Yeah.
He's only seeing that app now.
Gotcha. So that works, but we need to test more users as well. So let's now test a different user.
So what group are we going to test from now?
I think Rita might be in finance or HR. Let's just see. Yeah.
Oh, it looks like Rita's part of security.
Ah, yes, Rita's part of security. Yes, so that then means Rita gets to see the 5 because we did add her in. Yeah. And let's try Sienna.
Let's see what Sienna gets to see.
No, I think she was HR, but let's find out. There we go.
Yeah.
She's in human resources. So therefore, it looks like we've locked it down correctly. We've done a number of tests for all of the groups in question, and then we see what the end result is. So that's it, Greg, in terms of the UI.
Now, we did give access to the back end for people on Splunk. Let's take a look at what the configuration files look like on the back end. And how are we going to locate those files?
So what we need to do, I'm on a Mac at the moment. What we would need to do here, Greg, is to log on to our Jump server.
And how are we going to do that?
So we'll do that via SSH. So let me just pop in the command we need to put in.
So just real quick, Aleem, so people understand. We're on a Mac, so we're using something called Terminal, right?
Ah, good point, Greg. Yeah.
Now, people on a Windows device don't have the program called Terminal. How would they connect?
You could use download PuTTY if you like. MOBA Xterm is quite good as well. Any client. Just bear in mind, if you want to put a client on your machine and it's a work machine, make sure your company's happy. If it's your home machine, you feel free to put.
And these clients are what? They're SSH clients, right?
They're SSH clients, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the address there, Greg, that SSH address, you can see there where you're saying SSH username. So in our example, we're Study Club. That's the nickname that we typed in. And then we have that very long URL. And it's the first time we've hit that. So we want to say, look, do we want to keep that footprint? So the next time around, we're happy with that. Put in the password, which you'll
also known as a fingerprint.
A fingerprint, indeed. So now we've got a little bit of Study Club art. That's quite nice, actually. So now we're actually in the Jumpbox. So what's the next place we want to jump over to, Greg?
We're going to actually need to now SSH into our Splunk all-in-one instance.
Ah, and look, what's different? What's different now as opposed to what we did a second ago? There's something different there in terms of that IP address.
Oh, but that IP address I do notice is an internal, also known as a private IP address.
That's the whole point of the Jump server. Yeah.
Oh, now we're able to get in because we now have that fingerprint.
Exactly. So now, if you see down there, we're now on the correct Splunk instance. As we've called it a node, but we're on the correct instance. So what's our best friend when we're working with Splunk? One of our best friends, Greg. What's that called, our tool? That's
called B-Tool.
It's called B-Tool. I think we did a talk actually on B-Tool as part of Study Club, I think last year. Really, there's such amazing things you can do with B-Tool. So let's run a command to see where the files have been created, because we did the UI stuff. So what got created in the back end? So I put in the command for B-Tool to have a look at. There's 2 files in question, Greg, right? One is called authorize. And what was the other one called?
Authentication.
Gotcha. And they're both .conf files. So I've typed it in to get a listing there. And what's this now? Please run Splunk FTR as... Do
you know what the problem is here, Aleem?
Yeah, it's definitely related to permissions. Now, I'm actually the Study Club user. What user would I have to be to run that command?
You actually need to be the user that Splunk was started with. So we actually created a user called Splunk on this box, which Splunk runs as. Right.
So I remember that Linux command actually for going into that identity.
There we go.
There you go. So now we're actually down as the Splunk user. Let's run the same command and see what happens.
Sounds good.
There you go. So we can now see here, Greg, that the location of authorize.conf, we can see where it is. And we can also see all the settings. Now, we can actually narrow down that B-Tool command as well if you wanted to interrogate a single stanza. So let's put in the stanza name.
Yep. So we're looking for our specific stanza, right?
Yes.
The role
Yeah.
finance.
Yeah. So that's the settings that have been created. We didn't type in all of those settings in the UI. Splunk added some of those in for us.
So, Aleem, tell us, what's really the difference between authorize.conf and authentication.conf?
So with the authentication.conf, that is really taking the settings that we put into LDAP that we saw, those bind DN settings, username, password. So the authentication is all about actually getting privileges to be on the machines, yeah. And authorize then gives you the permissions for what you can do once you're authenticated.
Gotcha. So the authentication.conf are the settings that we set that we saw when we went in the authentication setup, right?
Absolutely.
And then authorize are those roles that we're mapping to?
Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Gotcha. So this is the contents of the authorize.conf file at the moment.
So those are our 5 roles that we created.
Indeed. So then what we can do is we can have a look for authentication. Let's see where that file is stored. So let's run our btool command, and straight away you can see it looks like it's in the same folder location. So that's like a default folder location in Splunk. Yeah, and just to say
that's the overall general location when anything new is created from a user.
Gotcha. And there's a best practice here, Greg. We can talk about maybe in the fireside as well. There's a few little pointers on why you might want to move that. Okay, so let's do that. I can also narrow it down to a stanza as well. So let's have a look at what it looks like. So Greg, this is the contents of the file. Now I'm looking at the password here, and the password there isn't what was in the email. It looks a bit different. So what's going on there?
The reason why it's different is because this is a very secure password, right? No Active Directory admin is going to want that password to be in clear text. So Splunk automatically will hash that password to keep it encrypted so people don't know what that password really is if they are looking at the configuration file.
So now we have a dilemma. That file there I could take and put on another machine. So if I take it that with a clear password, security not a good idea. But if I take that file as the hashed version and I go to another machine, what problem might I run into there?
What most likely will happen is that it's not going to know how to unhash it properly. So you'll have to clear out the password and re-enter it in and then restart your system so that it rehashes it.
Right. Greg, I've heard of this thing called secrets file. So
yes.
Therefore, if they shared a secret file, the Splunk instances, the hash would be okay then.
It would be. So the thing with it is that you can't share a secret file after you've already set up Splunk. It can only be shared during the initial setup.
So watch out, anybody who wants to copy over a secrets file. It's not going to work. Super.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really good. Good clarifications there, Greg. And just to then point out, those files in question, they're sitting on our GitHub repository. If anybody, so we're just exiting out of the Splunk instance, exiting out of the Jump server, and then going back into my Mac. So here you'll see, it might look different when you're looking at this, but we've uploaded the authentication.conf, the authorize.conf. Don't just use them. Watch out for that as well. Change the passwords, etc., to map in. But we've made them available. I think that's the key point here. So that is, Greg, that's pretty much the demo. So we went through connecting LDAP. We then applied permissions to these apps. We then logged out. We tested the permissions. We could see it was working. We then went into the back end. We had a look at what files were created, where they were created, talked about some of the things to look out for in terms of secret files, password, clear text, security. And now you can see them here on our GitHub repository. So I think that's super.
Absolutely. Don't forget one of the most important things that we showed, which is one of the best tools you can use when troubleshooting or looking for anything, and that is btool.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thanks for that, Greg.
Wow, Liam, that was a great demo that you just did there. I particularly like the parts where we kept it real and showed the mistakes that we did make as we were going through it.
What mistakes? Yes, there was that mistake. I think that added to the whole impact, I'm sure, today.
Absolutely. So tell everyone here what can we do to make sure that we can be a part of Study Club for Splunk moving forward?
Well, there's kind of two ways, Greg, to get involved. You can get involved as a contributor, so let's say a mechanic, and that's what you're doing now, which is fantastic. And if you want to do that, you can just connect to myself, as Tony and Suman on the user group Slack. We have a channel there called Study Club for Splunk. There's the QR code. There's the link. It'll bring you directly into that Slack channel. Now, if you also want to contribute, let's say as a learner, an easy rider, shall we say, absolutely fine. Stop by our Splunk channel, pull up at our GitHub garage. There's some really good resources in there. Hey, if you've got some ideas on new labs that you'd like to see, new things you want us to attack and demystify, let us know. Go tell your friends. That's the way to do this.
Well, that's awesome, Elaine. Thank you for all the information. And this was a great time. And I'll see you over on the fireside chat.
Certainly will do. Hey, Greg, that was a really good demo. But you know what? When you finish sessions like these, it's always worth having a bit of a look back. Lessons learned. What can we share with people who might want to do this themselves? So what stood out there for you?
One of the things that really stood out for me was the ease of the GUI and the way that you're able to actually input the information. Now, you need to know what information to put in each line. And that's part of the reason why we did the demo today, right? So people understand what goes where within that setup screen. But working closely with your AD administrator is going to, and now that you have all this knowledge, will make it really easy to be able to incorporate in any true production environment.
Yeah, because you know what? It's one thing learning like LDAP and AD in theory. The fact you can use this and do it in practice, like if you wanted to roll to the clone the admin user and try to untangle that mess, have some fun with it. Use different users, lock down different things, not just dashboards. Have some fun.
Exactly. I mean, why not take it even further and have multiple different settings within each department, right? You could have an admin in a certain department and then a power user and then a user. That's actually what we tend to set up in the on our consulting jobs when we're going out and setting our back controls.
Gotcha. So, when you spin up these labs, the last 2 hours, I believe. So if any user group wanted to use these, rather than like create the files, if they wanted to, they could create what we call a base file. And they could then drop it in, Greg, couldn't they? And then it's quicker to get to the starting block rather than having to prep a lot of things. So what are these base files about?
So base files are a best practice that Splunk consultants do, right? And what they are is they're files that go onto the back end of Splunk instances that already have the configurations pre-set up. Now, this is where we have to watch out for with that authentication.conf, right? Because we do have a hash password. So we have to make a call here on, do we send it out hashed and it being incorrect? Or you might have set up the secret file properly in your organization or in your environment to where it will be able to share properly. But if not, then what I always recommend doing is you share out and you push out the configurations as a base file, and then you just follow up through those individual instances and reset the password on those servers.
Gotcha. So is restarting Splunk enough then to hash it if you put it down as clear text?
Yeah, so you do have to restart the service, otherwise it will sit in clear text until the service is restarted.
Good point as well. Hey, one thing that I thought was interesting, Greg, what happens if I had a local Splunk user called John Kumar and then John Kumar coming from Active Directory and I logged in as both? Which one would take precedence?
That's
if they had the same password.
That is a great question.
Yeah.
So if it's the same password,
yeah.
it's going to be the local. If it's not the same password, you're not going to get in unless you use your local password, because it's
Gotcha.
always going to take that local user as top precedence.
And just for fun, right? Because we had the environment running with our scenario, I actually did it. I tested it, and it's absolutely the local user. So it's one thing again, Greg, having some book knowledge, getting onto this environment, being hands-on, allowed it to become muscle memory. I think that was
Absolutely.
pretty cool.
And I would encourage everyone who's listening to this talk today, go and test things out, play with it, see
Yeah.
what you can do, take it beyond what we've done, and share it back with us on the Slack channel.
Yeah, Greg, I've got another one as well, absolutely worth sharing to the audience. So when I was queuing up my B-tool command sequence, just, preparing for the demo, etc., I used, and I don't usually do this, but I actually used notes on my Mac, right? The problem is when I then would copy that command and paste it into my terminal session when I was connected to my Splunk server via SSH, it would show the command, but when I executed the command, nothing was getting returned. So I'm scratching my head thinking, goodness me, what's going on here? Because my command is good. What am I doing wrong? Then it dawned on me. It was non-printing characters. Yeah. So I couldn't see those, but they were non-printing characters, and I was pushing those in to the terminal. So I was essentially polluting my command. Nothing was going to happen. So the way around that, and just watch out for this, I used Microsoft Visual Studio Code. There are other programs as well you can use. And when I did that, straight away, I could see the non-printing characters, get rid of them, and then copy that full command, paste it into the terminal, ran like a dream. So watch out for that. And I think, Greg, we were chatting offline about maybe we could do some follow-up sessions with user groups around role-based access and other things, talking in more detail about roles as well.
Absolutely. I think that will be our next talk because it plays really well with this one, right? And what we will do is we'll do an in-depth discussion about how to set up those roles, how to limit access to those roles. So we showed today how to limit access with those roles to an application, but you can take it down to source types, to individual fields, to indexes on what you're limiting people to be able to see. So there's a lot of additional controls you can set up around all of these roles.
That's really cool. And I'd also love to go through how you can lock down the app from the command line as well. That meta
Absolutely.
file. Yeah,
Absolutely.
There's some really cool stuff we can show. I mean, today we can't show everything, but what we want to do is show you how easy it can be, but also point out some of the gotchas and some of the best practices, But Greg, it's probably worth mentioning now, we did this. It was, let's say it's an hour or so. How many hours was put in to make it happen? That's the thing.
It was a lot of hours put in, Aleem. Between the two of us, I would say it was between 30 and 50 hours. And then we had some help building the orchestration, building the environment. That in itself was at least another 50 to 100 hours.
But the thing is, Greg, let's say over the next year and a half, there's like a couple of thousand views. That then means, plus follow-up talks and user groups can use these. It means that we're helping the masses, which is why we're doing this in the first place.
Exactly. And that's why we want to make sure that we create AMIs and make those available, these Amazon machine images, right? We might not have this environment available for the next year. We might only have it available for the next month to 3 months. So we want to make sure that we make these instances available so people can actually recreate the environment. So not only will we be putting out what these AMIs are, but we're also going to be putting out documentation that goes hand in hand with your AWS talk. And how do we actually set this up in AWS? How do we get the environment going? How can we set up our own?
And for anybody who wishes to be a contributor, I'll tell you an observation I had. By going through this, setting up our demos, etc., it's really good for reinforcing our own knowledge. Because some of these things we don't do every day, do we? We might forget. So it's really nice to set that up, try things out, make a few mistakes, think, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. So it was really good in terms of collaboration. And I think it's helped to inspire us and hopefully others to go do more for our beloved community.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to see what we're going to be doing next. So, Aleem, tell me, when can people be expecting to see the next talk coming from Study Club for Splunk?
Well, the thing is, Greg, these do take quite a bit of time to actually, generate. If people want to come forward to contribute, fantastic. Come see us on the Slack channel. In terms of what we could do, I would imagine, Greg, at least once a quarter to have a gathering like this. I mean, we might be involved, but maybe a different contributor might do the demo. We'll break it down in such a way that you don't have to do everything. Just you come and do your piece. And myself and Greg, we can actually help people out, maybe to take away the barriers of doing all of this video stuff, post-production stuff, and things like that. But it's a huge thing if you can do it, because you reinforce your own knowledge, you give back to the community. If we can do it quarterly, it's just something to look forward to. And I'll tell you what, it's also a bit of a rush as well. It's very inspiring. It makes you feel really good about yourself.
Well, Liam, I would be honored to be a part of this with you in the future quarters on future talks. And I really hope that we get some contributors that would love to give at least some ideas of talks and demos that they would like to be have shown, if not demo themselves. So
Absolutely.
I'm really interested to see what people come to us with.
Yeah. I think a great measure of success, Greg, would be that for the next ones, maybe it's not you and me doing the doing, we're just enabling the doing and other people are brought in. I think that will be a great measure of success as well. But either way, we'll have these quarterly at least. And hands-on is the key. So I gotta say, I really like that orchestration, because we can make it happen straight away. People can get involved, get your hands on the keyboard, because 3 very important things for us to be successful are practice,
and
documentation. If we can actually use this orchestration, if we can use Study Club for Splunk to do that, that's a big win. And it's a great thing for our community, Greg.
It is. And I can't thank Bits.io and Gas enough for providing the orchestration. It made things so much easier for us. Thank you. Aleem, thank you for your time. Thank you for involving me on this. It was a great journey that we've been on together. I'm excited for what's to come. I'm excited for what's next.
Got in one, Greg. It's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. And let's do this again.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great B-Sides 22.